What if your silence isn't just a lack of noise, but the most powerful message you'll ever send? Think about it. When someone speaks too much, we tune out. But when someone says nothing, everyone pays attention. Silence triggers curiosity. It builds mystery. It makes people lean in. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the one who doesn't speak stands out. Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius understood this centuries ago. They didn't chase arguments. They didn't fight to be right. They mastered the secret language of silence, a language that says, "I don't need approval to know who I am." You see, silence isn't weakness. It's confidence. It's control. And most people are terrified of it because silence removes the masks. It reveals what words try to hide. The loudest statement you can ever make is to walk away without needing to explain. That's when people start to notice you. That's when you shift from noise to presence. And presence, real, grounded, unshakable presence, is what commands respect, loyalty, and even fear. This isn't about being passive. It's about choosing when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. If you've ever felt underestimated, ignored, or dismissed, this is your edge. Use it. Let your silence become your strategy. Let your presence speak louder than any defense. And most of all, let your absence become unforgettable. Most people think power is loud, that if you want to win, you have to raise your voice, dominate the conversation, out-argue your opponent. But true influence doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be heard. True influence is felt in the space you leave behind. It's what remains after you've said nothing, and still, they can't stop thinking about you. The Stoics mastered this. They knew silence wasn't just avoidance, it was control. Silence in the right moment forces the other person to reveal themselves. It makes them uncomfortable because they can't read you, and what people can't read, they fear. There's a reason why the most powerful people in the world often say the least. Presidents, generals, CEOs, they understand that over-talking is oversharing, that silence builds pressure, and pressure leads to power. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, don't. Every time someone attacks you and expects a reaction, stay still. Every time you want to prove your worth with words, let your silence prove more. Because here's the truth. People don't remember noise. They remember presence, the way you carried yourself, the calm in your eyes, the silence in your strength. The most dangerous people are often the quietest in the room, and when you walk away silently, you don't just end the conversation, you own it. Power isn't always seen in action. Sometimes it's in restraint. The invisible strength of holding back when you could strike. People expect noise, they expect explanations, they expect you to defend yourself. But silence breaks their expectations. It confuses them, and in that confusion, you gain the upper hand. The truth is, silence makes people reflect, not on you, but on themselves. They begin to wonder, why didn't you respond? What are you thinking? What does your silence mean? It creates tension, and tension creates power. Stoics knew that every word spoken is a piece of control given away. The less you say, the more they fill in the blanks, with fear, with curiosity, with respect. Your silence becomes a canvas they paint with their own insecurities. You don't need to raise your voice to win. You just need to own your presence. When you walk away from an argument without speaking, you don't lose. You evolve. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of clarity, of confidence, of control. The loudest voice in the room often proves the weakest mindset. But the one who says nothing, that's the one people remember. Silence allows you to choose your moment, and that moment, when it finally comes, lands like a thunderclap. It's not about never speaking. It's about knowing when your silence speaks more. If you're still here, you already feel it. The shift, the control, the power. Don't just watch. Subscribe now and step deeper into your silence. There's something haunting about silence. In a world that constantly demands attention, the one who chooses stillness becomes unforgettable. You don't need to shout to leave a mark. You just need to be intentional. And intention is quiet. It's focused. It's sharp like a blade hidden beneath robes, unseen but deadly. This is what most people miss. They think if they're not loud, they're invisible. But the opposite is true. When you hold your voice, people lean in. When you don't explain, they investigate. When you don't argue, they reflect. Your silence turns into a mirror, and suddenly, they're the ones exposed. Even nature understands this. A storm never roars before it strikes. A lion never warns before it pounces. Real power doesn't perform. It waits. It watches. It chooses. The Stoic silence is not emptiness. It's the weight of wisdom. In the noise of the world, your silence becomes sacred. And when everyone is rushing to react, you become the anchor. They panic, you pause. They lash out, you breathe. They fear silence, you master it. And by doing so, you rise above them. This is how you earn presence without performance, respect without requests, influence without words. Your silence becomes your language, and that language, that's what echoes when everything else fades. You don't need to dominate the room to own it. You just need to understand one truth. Silence isn't absence. It's dominance in disguise. Those who carry true presence rarely announce it. They let others feel it, and the feeling is undeniable. People talk to be heard, but the ones who get remembered are the ones who make others think. Silence makes room for thought, and thought leads to impact. That's why your quiet strength becomes unforgettable. It doesn't interrupt, it lingers. Stoics knew this long ago. They trained themselves to stay composed, not because they were weak, but because they understood control, emotional control, verbal control, social control, because he who controls himself needs not to control others, and that's what makes him powerful. When you walk into a room, you don't need noise, you need clarity. You don't need attention, you need intention. The loudest man in the room is often the weakest. He's seeking validation. You're centered, grounded, purposeful, and people can feel that. So what happens when you stop explaining yourself? When you don't chase approval? You create mystery, and mystery creates magnetism. People are drawn to what they don't fully understand. And silence, it's the ultimate unknown, the space between words, the tension between lines. Master that, and you master attention. Silence isn't just a lack of noise, it's the presence of control. When someone attacks you with words, with judgment, with blame, what they often want most is your reaction. They want to see you flinch, respond, break. But Stoic silence doesn't flinch. It watches, it absorbs, and then it moves, not in defense but in dominance. Every time you resist the urge to prove yourself, you sharpen your edge. You turn down the volume on the world and turn up the clarity within. And here's what most people will never understand. Silence isn't weakness. It's loaded. It's full of intention. And when used wisely, it's louder than 1,000 arguments. A powerful man doesn't need to be heard to be felt. He walks into a room and something shifts, not because he demands attention, but because his silence speaks for him. That is power, that is presence, and it's built in the quiet moments when no one's watching. The reason most people fear silence is because they can't control what they don't understand. And nothing is more difficult to decode than a person who chooses calm over chaos, stillness over show, retreat over rage. So ask yourself this: are you staying quiet because you're afraid, or because you've finally realized your power doesn't live in being loud? Sit with that. Let it challenge how you show up in the world. If this spoke to you, if even a part of you knows this is the path you need, don't just watch in silence. Subscribe. Stay. Let this channel remind you who you were before the noise took over.